Millionaire's new girlfriend teaches his kids how to apply makeup. But when he sees... Richard Thompson came home 2 hours earlier than usual after cancelling an important meeting. He hurried up the stairs of his Upper East Side apartment, eager to see his twin boys, whom he hadn't seen since early that morning. What he saw when he opened the living room door left him completely speechless. Jack and Ethan, his 6-year-old boys, were sitting on the beige leather couch with red lipstick on their lips and colorful eyeshadow around their eyes. Samantha, his girlfriend of 3 months, was laughing softly as she dabbed a bit of pink blush on Ethan's cheeks. "Daddy!" Jack shouted excitedly, standing up in Samantha's black high heels. "Look how pretty I look, just like Mommy." Richard felt the blood rush to his head. His hands trembled and he clenched his fists, trying to control the anger swelling inside him like a tidal wave. What the hell is going on here? He exploded, making Ethan shrink back into the couch. Samantha quickly stood up, putting the makeup brush back into the black cosmetic bag on the coffee table. "Richard, I can explain..." "Explain what?" he yelled, pointing at the boys. "That you're messing with my kids' heads, that you're turning them into..." He paused, searching for the right words. "This isn't normal, Samantha." Ethan began to cry softly, wiping his face with his small hands and smearing the makeup even more. Jack ran to his brother's side, kicking off the high heels and tossing them on the floor. "Daddy, we just wanted to look pretty," Jack murmured, his eyes filled with tears. "Aunt Samantha said we could." "She said you could?" Richard turned to Samantha, his dark eyes blazing with fury. "Who do you think you are, deciding what my kids can or can't do?" Samantha took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Her dark brown hair was tied in a low ponytail, and she wore a sleek black blouse that contrasted with her tan skin. "Richard, please let me explain. The boys..." "I don't want an explanation." He cut her off, stepping closer. "I want you to pack your things and get out of my house right now." "No, Daddy." Ethan jumped off the couch, running to Samantha and hugging her legs. "Aunt Samantha is nice. She tells us stories and makes us laugh." Jack also rushed to his father's girlfriend, forming a human shield around her. "We like Aunt Samantha, Daddy. She reminds us of Mommy," Jack said, his voice trembling. Richard felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. The mention of his late wife always left him vulnerable, but now it only fueled his anger. "Don't bring your mother into this," he shouted. "Your mother would never do something like this to you." Samantha knelt down to the boys' level, running her hands gently through their blonde hair. "Boys, go to your room and wash your faces, okay? Daddy and I need to talk," she said softly. "But Auntie..." Ethan started to protest. "Everything will be fine, sweetheart. Go ahead." She kissed their foreheads and gently nudged them toward the hallway. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, back to the story. When the boys left the room, Richard and Samantha stood staring at each other in silence for a few seconds. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound in the tense atmosphere. "Now you explain to me what this nonsense is all about," Richard said, crossing his arms over his chest. Samantha sighed, walking to the window that overlooked the distant Malibu shoreline. "Richard, I found the boys playing with my makeup this morning after you left for work. They were trying to put it on themselves and making a huge mess." "So? You should have taken everything away from them and that's it." "I tried, but they started crying and told me something that broke my heart." She turned to face him. "They said they wanted to look pretty like their mommy, who's in heaven." Richard shook his head, refusing to listen. "That doesn't justify anything. Boys don't wear makeup, Samantha. That's not what men do." "Says who?" she shot back, her voice growing firmer. "They're children, Richard. Children play, experiment, and discover the world. There's nothing wrong with that." "Yes, there is." He slammed his fist on the table, making the picture frames tremble. "I won't let my boys grow up confused about who they are." "Confused about what, exactly?" Samantha crossed her arms, staring him down. "About trying colors? About having fun? About expressing creativity?" Richard ran a hand through his brown hair, which was starting to show streaks of gray at the temples. At 35, he was a successful man in the construction business, but at that moment he felt lost. "My boys aren't going to turn into..." He paused, unable to finish the sentence. "Turn into what, Richard?" Samantha pressed. "Just say what you're thinking." "You know exactly what I mean," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. "No, I don't. That's why I want you to say it." She stepped closer. "Are you afraid they'll turn out gay? Is that it?" Richard didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. "Richard, makeup doesn't define anyone's sexual orientation. It's art, it's expression, it's play." Samantha shook her head in disbelief. "I can't believe you're this prejudiced." "I'm not prejudiced," he exploded again. "I just want to protect my boys. They've already been through enough trauma losing their mother. I won't let them suffer even more because of people like you who don't understand a thing about raising kids." "People like me?" Samantha's voice trembled with indignation. "Richard, I've worked as a professional makeup artist for 10 years. I know exactly what I'm doing. You work on models and actresses. You don't have kids. You know nothing about raising boys." The words cut like knives, and Richard saw the pain reflected in Samantha's brown eyes. He immediately knew he'd gone too far, but his wounded pride wouldn't let him apologize. "You're right," she said quietly, picking up her purse and makeup bag. "I don't have children, and apparently I won't get the chance to learn from yours." "Samantha, wait. No, Richard. You've made it very clear what you think of me." She walked toward the door. "I just want you to know that in 3 months of spending time with Jack and Ethan, they've never seemed as happy as they were this afternoon. They were happy because you were turning them into clowns. They were happy because someone was finally paying attention to them, Richard." She turned one last time before leaving. "When was the last time you actually played with your boys? Talked to them about their mother? Let them express how much they miss her?" The door slammed shut, leaving Richard alone in a room that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. He sank onto the couch, burying his head in his hands. From the hallway came the muffled sounds of crying. Jack and Ethan were in the bathroom, trying to wipe the makeup off their faces and crying over Aunt Samantha's departure. Richard stood and walked to the bathroom, finding the 2 boys in front of the mirror. Ethan was scrubbing his face hard, leaving his skin red, while Jack helped him with a damp cloth. "Daddy, is Aunt Samantha coming back?" Ethan asked, his eyes swollen from crying. "No, son, she's not coming back." Richard knelt in front of them, trying to help clean their faces. "And you can't play with that stuff anymore, okay?" "But why, Dad?" Jack asked, genuinely confused. "We just wanted to look pretty." Richard didn't know how to respond. How could he explain concepts to 2 6-year-olds that he himself struggled to articulate? "Because boys don't play with makeup," was all he managed to say. "Mom used to wear makeup," Ethan murmured softly. "Mom was a woman, Ethan. But she let us play with her stuff. Remember, Jack?" Ethan looked at his brother for confirmation. Jack nodded, and Richard felt a pang in his chest. He vaguely remembered Jennifer, his late wife, letting the boys play with her beauty products when they were even younger. Back then, he'd found it funny and innocent. "That was when you were babies," Richard said, trying to convince himself as much as his sons. "Now you're big boys." "So we can't remember Mom anymore?" Ethan asked, and the question struck Richard like lightning. "Of course you can remember Mom, son. Just in other ways." "What other ways, Dad?" Jack pressed. Richard fell silent. In the 2 years since Jennifer had died in a car accident, he'd avoided talking about her with the boys. He thought it was better that way, that they'd forget faster and hurt less. "Let's have dinner," he said, dodging the conversation. "You'll go to bed early tonight." That night, Richard stayed up late, wandering through the empty house. He passed through the living room and saw some makeup products Samantha had left on the couch, a red lipstick and a small palette of colorful eyeshadows. He picked them up, catching her lingering scent on them. For a moment, he wondered if he'd overreacted, but he quickly pushed the thought away. He was their father. He knew his sons better than anyone, and he knew what was best for them. The next morning, Richard woke to the sound of crying from the boys' room. When he walked in, he found Jack and Ethan huddled together on the bed, softly sobbing. "What's wrong? Did you have a nightmare?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "We dreamed about Aunt Samantha," Jack said between sniffles. "She was leaving again and we couldn't run after her. And we dreamed about Mom too," Ethan added. She was sad because we can't remember her face very well anymore." Richard's chest tightened. It had been months since the boys had nightmares, and now they seemed to have returned full force. "Aunt Samantha said we could draw Mom with any colors we wanted," Jack continued. "That she must have been as beautiful as a rainbow." "You talked about Mom with her?" Richard asked, surprised. "We did. She asked if we remembered Mom, and we said yes, but sometimes we forget," Ethan explained. "Then she said whenever we missed her, we could imagine Mom all colorful and bright in the sky." Richard swallowed hard. In 2 years, he'd never had a conversation like that with his sons about Jennifer. He'd always changed the subject or just said she was fine in heaven and left it at that. "And did you tell her you wanted to look like Mom?" he asked. "We told her we wanted to be pretty like her," Jack confirmed. "Then Aunt Samantha said everyone can be pretty however they want, and Mom would be happy seeing us happy." Richard closed his eyes, feeling more confused than ever. The conversation Samantha had with his sons seemed far deeper and healthier than anything he'd managed to give them in months. "Dad, can you call Aunt Samantha?" Ethan asked hopefully. "We want to say sorry for making you mad." "You didn't do anything wrong," Richard said automatically, but the words sounded strange coming from his mouth. "So why did she have to leave?" Jack asked. Richard couldn't answer. How could he explain that he had sent away the first person who had managed to make his children smile genuinely since their mother's death? "Get dressed for school," he said, getting out of bed. "Mrs. Jenkins must already be waiting for you for breakfast." Mrs. Jenkins had been the boys' nanny since they were born. A 62-year-old woman with graying hair always tied in a bun and reading glasses hanging around her neck. She had taken care of Richard when he was a child, and when Jack and Ethan were born, it was only natural for her to take care of them too. When Richard went down to the kitchen, he found Mrs. Jenkins preparing breakfast with a worried expression. "Good morning, Richard," she said without looking at him, stirring the eggs in the pan. "Good morning, Jenkins. The boys will be down soon." "They cried all night," she said bluntly, without beating around the bush. "They kept asking for the fun aunt, as they call your girlfriend." Richard sipped his coffee in silence, not wanting to get into it. "You know," Mrs. Jenkins continued, pouring orange juice into the boys' glasses, "in 2 years of taking care of them alone, I've never seen those boys laugh the way they did yesterday afternoon. Jenkins." "Let me speak, Richard." She turned to face him, hands on her hips. "I've taken care of you since you were little. I watched you grow up, get married, have children, and I also saw how you shut down after Jennifer passed. I didn't shut down. You ran away, Richard. You ran from the pain, from the memories, and ended up running from your own children." Mrs. Jenkins shook her head. "These boys are growing up without a mother figure, without feminine affection, without someone to talk to them about feelings. They have you. I'm the nanny, Richard. I'm not their mother, not their stepmother, not their father's girlfriend. I'm an employee who takes care of them because you pay my salary." Her voice softened. "But that young woman..." She looked at them with real love. Richard felt a lump in his throat. Mrs. Jenkins had always been straightforward, but her words had never hurt this much. "She was making a fool of them, Jenkins. She was making them happy, Richard. There's a difference." Jack and Ethan came down to the kitchen just then, their eyes still red from crying. They greeted their father and Mrs. Jenkins with less enthusiasm than usual, sitting at the small kitchen table that overlooked the ocean. "Good morning, my angels," Mrs. Jenkins said, serving them scrambled eggs. "Eat everything up nicely, okay?" "Aunt Jenkins," Ethan began in a small voice, "do you know Aunt Samantha's phone number?" Mrs. Jenkins glanced quickly at Richard before answering. "No, sweetheart, why?" "We wanted to call her," Jack explained, "to see if she's okay." Richard felt another tightness in his chest. His 6-year-old boys were worried about Samantha's well-being, while he was only thinking about his own anger and wounded pride. "Aunt Samantha is fine, boys," Richard said. "She just needed to take care of her own life." "But is she coming back someday?" Ethan pressed. "I don't know, son." "Can you ask her to come back?" Jack asked, hope in his eyes. Richard looked at the two boys, saw the expectation on their faces, and felt like he was failing as a father yet again. Now's not the time to talk about this. You'll be late for school. The rest of breakfast passed in silence. The boys ate slowly, without their usual appetite, while Richard pretended to read the news on his phone. When they left for school with Mrs. Jenkins, Richard was alone in the apartment for the first time since Samantha had gone. The house felt different, emptier, even though she had only spent a few afternoons there. He walked into the living room and realized he had forgotten to put away the makeup products he'd found the night before. The red lipstick and the eyeshadow palette were still on the coffee table, like little reminders of the previous day's chaos. Richard picked them up, examining the palette's vibrant colors: pink, blue, gold, green. Colors he automatically associated with femininity, but which to his sons seemed to represent nothing more than joy and creativity. He remembered a conversation he'd had with Jennifer just a few months before the accident. She had been worried because Richard always reacted badly when the boys showed interest in things he considered for girls: dolls, toy kitchens, and yes, makeup. "Richard, they're children," Jennifer had said. "Let them explore the world without so much judgment." "I just want them to grow up knowing who they are," he had replied. "And who they are will come naturally, love. It's not for you to decide for them." At the time, Richard had nodded along, but deep down he'd remained uncomfortable, and now 2 years later it seemed nothing had changed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, back to it. The phone rang, snapping Richard out of his thoughts. It was Dr. Wilson, the boy's pediatrician. "Richard, I need to talk to you about Jack and Ethan," the doctor said, his tone concerned. "What's wrong? Are they sick?" "Not exactly. Their teacher called me because they've been showing regressive behavior at school. They've started wetting themselves again, isolating from their classmates, and refusing to participate in activities." Richard closed his eyes, another consequence of his rash decisions. "When did this start?" "Yesterday, apparently. The teacher said they arrived sad and didn't want to play at recess. They just sat hugging each other under the tree in the yard." "I see. Richard, has something happened at home? Any changes in their routine?" Richard hesitated before answering. "We had an incident yesterday. My girlfriend and I broke up and the boys were upset." "I understand. You know, children who've already experienced parental loss are very sensitive to other separations, right? To them, anyone who leaves their lives can feel like losing a mother figure again." The doctor's words echoed in Richard's mind. He hadn't thought of that. To Jack and Ethan, Samantha wasn't just their father's girlfriend. She had become a mother figure in their lives. "What should I do?" "For now, just observe. If this behavior continues for a few more days, it might be good for them to resume sessions with the child psychologist. And Richard, try talking to them about what happened. Children need to understand the changes in their lives." After hanging up, Richard stood frozen in the middle of the room, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He had acted on impulse, driven by prejudices he couldn't even fully explain, and now his sons were paying the price. The day dragged on. Richard tried to focus on work, but his mind kept returning to the conversation with the doctor and the image of his crying boys. At 4 in the afternoon, he decided to leave the office early and pick them up from school. When he arrived at the private school in Beverly Hills where they attended, he found Jack and Ethan sitting alone on the bench by the front office, waiting for Mrs. Jenkins to arrive. "Daddy!" Ethan ran to hug him, but Richard noticed his usual enthusiasm was missing. "What a nice surprise," their teacher Emily said as she approached. "Usually it's Mrs. Jenkins who picks them up." "I thought I'd surprise them," Richard said with a forced smile. "How was their day?" The teacher hesitated, looking at the boys before answering. "Can we talk for a minute?" She pointed to a quieter corner of the yard. Richard asked Jack and Ethan to wait on the bench and followed the teacher. "Richard, I'm worried about them," Emily began. "Yesterday and today they've been very different. Listless, sad, they don't want to play with their classmates. Dr. Wilson called me. He told me. They made a drawing in art class today that caught my attention," she said, showing him a sheet of paper. Normally, they draw their family with you themselves, and sometimes a figure in the sky representing their mother. But today, Richard looked at the drawing and felt a tightness in his chest. Jack and Ethan had drawn 4 figures, the 2 of them, him, and a 4th person who was clearly a woman. This woman was colored in with many different shades, and there was an arrow pointing to the sky with the word "Mommy" written in childish handwriting. They explained to me that this is the cool aunt who was teaching them how to be colorful like Mommy, Emily continued. Richard, I don't know what happened, but it seems like you've all lost someone important to them. It's complicated, Richard murmured, still staring at the drawing. Can I make a suggestion? Talk to them. Let them express what they're feeling. Children need to understand what's happening around them, especially kids who've already lost their mother. Richard drove home with the boys in silence. In the car, they didn't hum along to the radio songs like they usually did. They just stared out the window, watching the city pass by without much interest. When they got to the apartment, Mrs. Jenkins greeted them with a worried look. How was school today, my angels? It was fine, Jack answered, but his voice lacked enthusiasm. Fine how? Did you play? Make new friends? We didn't feel like playing, Ethan said, sitting on the living room couch. We just kept thinking about Aunt Samantha. Mrs. Jenkins looked at Richard with an expression that clearly said, I told you so. Boys, go take a bath and change, Richard said. We'll talk later. While the boys were in the bathroom, Mrs. Jenkins approached Richard. You need to do something, Richard. They're hurting. I know, Jenkins, but it's not that simple. Why isn't it simple? She crossed her arms. You like the girl. She likes you and the boys. What's the problem? The problem is, she was letting them play with makeup, Richard snapped in a low voice so the boys wouldn't hear. So what? Mrs. Jenkins shot back. They were happy, Richard. For the first time in months, I saw those boys genuinely smile. Boys don't play with makeup, Jenkins. That's not normal. Normal according to who? She stared him down. Richard, I took care of you when you were little, remember? You loved playing with your mother's makeup. You'd paint yourself, draw fake mustaches with her mascara. Richard stopped, surprised. He'd completely forgotten about that. I was really little. You were 7, older than the boys are now. Mrs. Jenkins shook her head. And you know what happened when your father found out? The same thing you did yesterday. He yelled, forbade it, said it wasn't for boys. Richard vaguely remembered the incident. His father had reacted with so much anger that he never touched his mother's things again. And look how you turned out. Successful, a good father, a good husband to Jennifer, Mrs. Jenkins went on. Playing with makeup as a kid didn't change anything about who you are, Richard. But nothing. You're repeating your father's mistakes and you know it, she sighed. The difference is Jack and Ethan have already lost their mother. They can't lose anyone else because of your prejudices. That night, after dinner, Richard sat down with the boys in the living room for the talk he had promised. They were in their pajamas, hair still damp from their bath, sitting on either side of him on the couch. Boys, I want to talk to you about yesterday, Richard began, trying to find the right words. About when Daddy yelled at Aunt Samantha, Ethan asked. Yes. About that. Why did you yell, Dad? Jack questioned. Aunt Samantha didn't do anything wrong. Richard took a deep breath. I yelled because I got scared. Scared of what? Ethan moved closer to him. Scared that you... He paused, trying to explain it in a way they'd understand. Scared that people wouldn't understand your game and would make you feel bad. But we just wanted to look pretty like Mom, Jack said, confused. And you are already handsome, son. You don't need makeup for that. Aunt Samantha said everyone can be pretty however they want, Ethan countered. And that Mom would be happy seeing us happy. Richard felt a lump in his throat. Samantha's words echoed in his mind, and he realized she had achieved in one afternoon what he hadn't in 2 years, talking about Jennifer naturally and healthily with the boys. Do you miss Mom? Richard asked, shifting the focus of the conversation. Every day, Jack answered immediately. Especially at bedtime, Ethan added. We remember her perfume and the stories she used to tell. And you wanted to look like her? Is that why you liked the makeup? We wanted to feel like she was close, Jack explained. Aunt Samantha said when we miss her, We can imagine Mom all colorful in the sky, shining like a rainbow. Richard closed his eyes, feeling a mix of remorse and admiration for Samantha. She had turned the pain of loss into something beautiful and colorful, while he had just avoided the subject. "And do you like Aunt Samantha?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "We love Aunt Samantha," Ethan exclaimed. "She makes us laugh and tells us stories about Mom in heaven." "She said Mom must be really proud of us," Jack added, "and that she's always watching over us, even if we can't see her." Richard hugged both boys, feeling guilty for depriving them of this connection with someone who clearly loved and understood them. "Dad, can you say sorry to Aunt Samantha?" Ethan asked, looking into his father's eyes. "It's complicated, son." "Why is it complicated?" Jack insisted. "The teacher at school always says when we do something wrong, we have to say sorry." Richard didn't know how to answer. How could he explain to two children that his pride and prejudice were bigger than their happiness? "Let's go to bed," he said, avoiding the conversation once again. "We'll talk more tomorrow." But the boys didn't fall asleep easily. Richard stayed awake listening to the muffled sounds of crying from their room. Around 11 at night, he got up and went to them, finding Jack and Ethan hugging each other on the bed, softly crying. "What's wrong, boys?" "We miss Aunt Samantha," Ethan sobbed, "and Mom too." "Are they together in heaven now?" Jack asked with the innocence of a 6-year-old. Richard sat on the edge of the bed, unsure how to answer. He had never been religious, but in that moment, he wished he had faith in something greater to comfort his children. "Mom is in heaven, son, but Aunt Samantha, she's here on earth, living her life." "But can she visit us?" Ethan asked hopefully. "I don't know, son, maybe not." The boys started crying again, and Richard felt completely lost. He had created a situation he didn't know how to fix, and his children were paying the price for his stubbornness. The next morning, Richard woke up determined to try and fix at least some of the damage he had done. After dropping the boys off at school, he called Samantha. The phone rang several times before she answered, and when she did, her voice was cold and distant. "Hello?" "Samantha, it's Richard." There was a long pause before she responded. "What do you want, Richard?" I want to talk. Can we meet? I don't think we have anything left to say." "Samantha, please. The boys are hurting. They miss you." "And you?" she asked, and Richard detected a sliver of hope in her voice. He hesitated before answering, wrestling with his pride. "I miss you too." "Richard, you made it very clear the day before yesterday what you think of me. You said I know nothing about parenting, that I'm confusing your son. I know, and I was wrong." Another long pause. "What exactly were you wrong about?" Richard understood she wasn't going to make this easy for him, and maybe that was for the best. "Everything about the makeup, about you, about what's best for my kids." "And what changed your mind?" "The boys won't stop crying. They're not sleeping right, not eating right, not playing at school," Richard's voice cracked. "And I realized that in 3 months you connected with them in a way I haven't managed in 2 years. Richard, please, Samantha, give me a chance to explain in person. You pick the place." She sighed on the other end. "There's a diner in Beverly Hills near the Westfield Mall, Corner Cafe. I can meet you there at 2. "Thank you, I'll be there." Richard arrived at the Corner Cafe 15 minutes early, chose a secluded table in the back, and waited, as nervous as a teenager on a first date. When Samantha walked in, he noticed she looked different, more serious, more distant. She wore a simple white blouse and jeans, her hair loose over her shoulders. Even dressed casually, she was still beautiful, and Richard felt a pang of regret for ruining everything. "Hi," she said, sitting across from him. "Hi. Thanks for coming." "I only came because you mentioned the boys," she made it clear from the start. "If they're hurting, I need to know." Richard told her about the last 2 days, the constant crying, the nightmares, the regression at school, the drawing they'd made that included her in the family. "And what do you want me to do?" Samantha asked when he finished. "I want you to come back. For them." "Just for them?" Richard met her eyes, seeing the hurt his words had caused. "No. For me too. Richard, you humiliated me in front of your sons, treated me like some stranger who was harming them. Her voice trembled slightly. You questioned my professionalism, said I know nothing about parenting. I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough. She shook her head. You need to understand why you reacted that way, because if you don't, it'll happen again. Richard stayed silent, knowing she was right. I think I'm afraid, he finally admitted. Afraid of what? Afraid my sons won't turn out the way I expect. Afraid people will judge them. Afraid I don't know how to raise them alone. He ran a hand through his hair. Ever since Jennifer left, I've felt lost. I'm scared of failing at everything. And you think controlling their every move will keep you from failing? I guess. I don't know what I think, Richard admitted. All I know is when I saw them wearing makeup, I panicked, like it was something terrible. Why terrible? Because, he hesitated, because my father always taught me there are things for boys and things for girls, and that mixing this is wrong. And you never questioned that? No, until 2 days ago. Samantha sipped her coffee in silence, studying his face. Richard, you know makeup is just paint, right? Colors we put on our faces to express ourselves, to feel good, to play around. She leaned forward. For the boys, it wasn't about gender. It was about feeling their mother's presence, about connecting with her in some way. I understand that now. Do you really? Or are you just saying that because you want me back? The question caught Richard off guard. I think I'm trying to understand. Then let me help you understand better. Samantha crossed her arms. If you go home today and find the boys playing with dolls, what will your reaction be? Richard thought for a moment. I don't know. I hope it'll be different from last time. And if they want to wear a dress, or paint their nails, or play house as the mum? Each question unsettled Richard in a different way, and he realized he still had a lot of work ahead to unlearn prejudices he'd carried for 35 years. I need time to process all this, he admitted. Richard, I can't come back into the boys' lives if you're not sure you've changed. They've already suffered a huge loss. I can't risk them getting hurt again because you had another panic attack. I understand. Besides, Samantha continued, I suffered too. You treated me like I was a bad person, like I was trying to harm children I love. That hurt me deeply, Richard. A pang of guilt hit Richard's chest. Samantha, I'm so sorry. Truly. You didn't deserve that. No, I didn't, she agreed. And I don't deserve to go through it again. What can I do to fix this? Samantha stayed silent for a long moment, stirring the sugar in her coffee. First, you need therapy. You have to understand where these prejudices come from and work to unlearn them. Okay. Second, you need to talk to the boys about gender, about expression, about how they can play with whatever they want without it defining who they are. How do I do that? I don't even know where to start. There are books, guides, specialized psychologists, she shrugged. You're a smart, successful man, Richard. If you want to learn, you'll figure it out. And third, you need to prove to me you've really changed, not with words, but with actions. How? Samantha stood up, grabbing her purse. That's something you'll have to figure out on your own. She placed a $10 bill on the table for the coffee. Richard, I care about you, and I love those boys as if they were my own. But I can't go back to suffering because of your fears. Samantha, wait. When you're sure you can accept me fully, including my work and how I see the world, come find me. She turned to leave. But only if you're really sure, because second chances are just that. One chance, Richard. Richard sat alone in the diner, staring at the empty chair where Samantha had been. For the first time in 2 years, he felt completely lost, yet, paradoxically, more determined than ever. That afternoon, instead of returning to the office, Richard drove to a bookstore at the Beverly Hills Mall. He spent 2 hours searching for books on child development, gender, and children's emotional growth. He bought 5 books, including one on how to talk to kids about loss and grief, and another on deconstructing gender roles in childhood. In the children's section, he also found an illustrated book about different families and acceptance. When he got home, Mrs. Jenkins was preparing the boys' afternoon snack. They'd be back from school in a few minutes. "How did the meeting go?" she asked, seeing the bags of books Richard was carrying. "Educational," Richard replied, showing her the books. Mrs. Jenkins smiled for the first time in days. "Now you're speaking my language," she approved. "That girl really made you think, huh?" "She did. And she made me realize I have a lot to learn about my own kids." The boys came home from school still sad, but Richard noticed a slight improvement in their mood when they saw he was home early. "Daddy!" Ethan ran to hug him. "Why are you home early?" "Because I want to spend more time with you." Richard knelt to be at their level. "And because I have some important things to talk to you about." "About Aunt Samantha?" Jack asked hopefully. "About a lot of things, including Aunt Samantha." After snack time, Richard sat with the boys in the living room, the books spread out on the coffee table. "Boys, I want to apologize to you," he began. "Why, Daddy?" Ethan asked. "Because I yelled at Aunt Samantha for no reason, and because I stopped you from playing with something that was making you happy." "So we can play with makeup again?" Jack asked excitedly. "You can play with whatever you want, son, as long as no one gets hurt and nothing in the house gets broken." The boys exchanged glances, as if they couldn't believe what they were hearing. "Even if it's girl stuff," Ethan whispered. "Ethan, there's no such thing as girl stuff and boy stuff. There's just things we like and things we don't." Richard picked up one of the books and showed them. "Look here. This book has stories about boys who love ballet, girls who play soccer, boys who cook, girls who build things." "Really?" Jack moved closer, interested. "Really. And they're all happy doing what they love." Richard spent the next hour reading with the boys, showing them the illustrations and explaining that every person is unique and special in their own way. It was the first real heart-to-heart conversation he'd had with them since Jennifer's death. "Daddy," Ethan said when they finished reading, "is Aunt Samantha coming back?" "I don't know, son. She's upset with me because of what happened." "But you can apologize to her, like you did with us," Jack suggested. "I already did. But sometimes when we hurt someone, saying sorry isn't enough. We have to show we've really changed." "How do we show that?" Ethan wanted to know. "By being different, acting differently next time." "And will you act differently, Daddy?" Jack asked. Richard looked at his two boys, saw the hope in their eyes, and felt determination growing inside him. "I will, son. I promise." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. In the days that followed, Richard threw himself into his journey of self-discovery. He booked an appointment with a psychologist specializing in gender and parenting issues, started reading the books he'd bought, and most importantly, began truly observing his sons. He realized Jack had a natural artistic sensitivity. The boy loved drawing, painting, and creating colorful stories. Ethan, on the other hand, was more practical, but also showed interest in cooking and caring for the balcony plants. Both had traits Richard had tried to suppress, thinking they were too girly. But now, watching without prejudice, he saw they were just natural parts of who they were. In therapy, the psychologist, Dr. Margaret, a 50-year-old woman with graying hair and a warm smile, helped Richard understand where his biases came from. "Richard, you grew up in a generation where gender roles were very rigid," she explained during the second session. "Your father was probably raised even more strictly. These patterns pass from generation to generation until someone decides to break them. But how do I break something that's so deeply rooted in me? With awareness and practice. Every time you feel that automatic reaction of, 'That's not for boys,' you want to stop and ask yourself, why not? Who decided that? What harm could it do?" Richard began applying this technique at home. When Jack asked to help cook, instead of saying, "The kitchen is for women," he taught the boy how to bake a cake. When Ethan wanted to plant flowers on the balcony, instead of suggesting he plant something more masculine, he bought colorful seeds, and they planted them together. The boys responded positively to their father's changes. They smiled more, ate better, and slept without nightmares. But they still asked about Aunt Samantha every day. "Daddy, "When is Aunt Samantha coming back?" was the constant question. "I don't know yet, kids. I'm working on it." A week after the meeting at the corner cafe, Richard decided it was time to take the next step. He researched Samantha's work and discovered she had specialized in artistic makeup for children's theater and corporate events. He found her professional profile on social media and was impressed. Samantha wasn't just an ordinary makeup artist, she was an artist. Her creations turned faces into works of art, and much of her work was for social causes. Richard saw photos of her painting children's faces in hospitals, transforming scars into colorful butterflies. He saw images of charity events where she volunteered her time to bring joy to underprivileged kids. He read testimonials from parents thanking her for her work. He realized he had judged Samantha based on prejudices about her profession without ever taking the time to truly understand what she did. That night, Richard made a decision. He called Samantha again. "Hello?" she answered with the same coldness as before. "Samantha, it's Richard. Please don't hang up." "What do you want now?" "I want to show you I'm changing, but I need your help." "How so?" "The boys have a school presentation next Friday, Career Day. Each child will talk about the job they want when they grow up. And Jack said he wants to be an artistic makeup artist, like you." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Richard?" "Samantha, I want you to come to the school with him, as a special guest, to show your work to the other kids and parents." "Are you sure about what you're asking?" Her voice softened. "I am. And I want you to know that if anyone has a problem with it, I'll be right there beside you, defending you and defending my son." "Richard, this is unexpected." "I know, but it's the least I can do to show I've really changed." "What if I say no?" "Then I'll respect your decision, but I hope you'll give Jack this chance. And me." Samantha was silent for a long moment. "When's the presentation?" "Friday at 2 in the afternoon." "I need to think about it." "Of course. But Samantha, no matter your answer, I want you to know I'm proud of the work you do. I looked into you, saw your photos, read the testimonials. You're amazing at what you do." "Thank you," she said quietly. "And I'm sorry I didn't recognize that before." On Thursday night, the day before the presentation, Samantha called back. "Richard?" "Hi, Samantha. I'll be at the school tomorrow." Richard felt a wave of relief and gratitude. "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to Jack. It's not just for Jack, Richard, it's for you too. I want to see if you've really changed." "You'll see. I hope so. Because if you disappoint me again, I won't disappoint you. I promise." On Friday, Richard left work early to pick up the boys from school. Jack was nervous and excited at the same time. "Daddy, is Aunt Samantha really coming?" he asked for the 10th time. "Yes, son," she promised. "What if the other parents think it's weird?" Richard stopped the car and turned to look at Jack in the back seat. "Son, if anyone thinks it's weird, that's their problem, not ours. You have the right to want to be whatever you want when you grow up. Even if it's a makeup artist, especially if it's a makeup artist. You've seen Aunt Samantha's work. It's beautiful, it's important, it makes people happy." Jack smiled, and Richard saw the same sparkle in the boy's eyes that he'd seen that fateful afternoon with the makeup. When they arrived at school, Samantha was already there, setting up her materials. She'd brought a professional case full of makeup, brushes, and kid-safe products. "Aunt Samantha!" Jack ran to hug her, followed closely by Ethan. "Hi, my loves." She squeezed them tight, and Richard saw tears in her eyes. "I missed you so much." "We missed you too," Ethan said, clinging to her. Richard walked over, and Samantha greeted him with a formal nod. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for inviting me." The presentation started at 2 on the dot. Several children talked about traditional careers: doctor, lawyer, teacher, firefighter. When it was Jack's turn, he stepped onto the small stage set up in the classroom, his chest puffed with pride. "My name is Jack, and when I grow up, I want to be an artistic makeup artist," he said clearly. I brought Aunt Samantha, who's a real makeup artist, to show you what she does." Samantha stepped onto the stage, looking lovely in a colorful blouse and jeans, carrying her case. "Hi, kids. My name is Samantha, and I've been doing artistic makeup for 10 years, she began with a warm smile. "Who here knows what artistic makeup is?" Several little hands shot up, and the kids eagerly joined in. Samantha explained that artistic makeup was different from everyday makeup. It was an art form that transformed faces into characters, animals, or works of art. "I work in theaters, on movies, in hospitals, helping sick kids feel better, and at special events," she continued. "Jack wants to learn this profession, and I think that's fantastic." "But isn't makeup for girls?" a child in the audience asked. Richard tensed, ready to step in, but Samantha answered naturally. "No, sweetheart. Makeup is art, and art is for everyone. There are lots of famous men who work with makeup. Did you know that back in the day in theaters, only men did artistic makeup?" "Really?" several kids asked at once. "Really? And nowadays both men and women can be artistic makeup artists. What matters is having talent and loving what you do." Samantha then gave a demonstration, turning Jack's face into a colorful lion. The kids were enchanted, clapping and asking to be made up too. Richard watched with a full heart. He saw the joy on Jack's face, the admiration of the other kids, and most of all, how Samantha handled the questions and comments with wisdom and patience. After the presentation, some parents approached Samantha to praise her work and ask for her card. One mother mentioned her daughter had loved the presentation and wanted to hire Samantha for a birthday party. "Congratulations," Richard said when they were alone. "You were amazing." "Thank you. Jack was amazing too. He has a lot of natural talent." "Samantha, Richard, let's not talk here," she interrupted, glancing at the boys playing nearby. "How about we take them out for ice cream? We can talk later." They went to an ice cream shop near the school, and Jack and Ethan wouldn't stop talking about the performance. They were beaming, and Ethan even said he wanted to learn artistic makeup too. "Can you teach us, Aunt Samantha?" Ethan asked. "If your dad says it's okay, of course I can," she replied, glancing at Richard. "Dad will say yes," Jack said quickly. "Right, Dad?" "Of course I will," Richard confirmed. "In fact, I'd like to learn too." Samantha looked at him surprised. "You?" "Me. I want to understand your work better, and I want to learn how to do things that make my kids happy." After the boys finished their ice cream and went to play in the shop's playground, Richard and Samantha sat at a more secluded table to talk. "Today was a test, wasn't it?" Richard asked. "It was," she admitted. "I needed to see how you'd react in a situation where you might feel ashamed or embarrassed. And how did I do?" "Better than I expected," she smiled for the first time. "You really stood up for Jack, and for me too. And I'll keep standing up for you whenever it's needed. Richard, I can see you're trying to change, and that means a lot to me. Does it mean enough for you to give me a second chance?" Samantha looked at the boys playing, then back at Richard. "I want to give you that chance, Richard, but I need to be sure you won't back down at the first sign of trouble." "I won't back down." "How can you be so sure?" Richard thought for a moment before answering. "Because I saw my kids today. I saw how they lit up when you arrived, how proud they were of you, how supported and loved they felt." He paused, emotional. "And I saw how proud I felt of them. For the first time in a long while, I felt like a real father." "Richard, Samantha, I can't promise I'll be perfect. I was raised in a very rigid way, and sometimes I still have automatic reactions that aren't the best." He met her gaze. "But I can promise I'll always stop, think, and try to do what's best for the boys. And for you. What if they want to do things that make you uncomfortable? I'll take a deep breath, remember therapy, and ask myself, is this hurting anyone? Is this making them happy? If the answer is no to the first and yes to the second, then it's okay." Samantha smiled, a softer expression crossing her face. "You really went to therapy?" "I'm going. Twice a week. Dr. Margaret is helping me understand where my prejudices come from and how to unlearn them." "And what have you learned so far?" "That masculinity isn't fragile, that my kids can play with whatever they want without it defining who they are. and that love has no gender, color, or shape. That's really beautiful, Richard. It's what I learned from watching you with them, he admitted. You love them unconditionally, and they feel it. Samantha wiped a tear from her cheek. I really do love those boys, Richard, like they were my own. I know, and they know it too. Aunt Samantha, Jack came running from the playground. Can you do Ethan's makeup too? Of course, sweetheart. What do you want, Ethan? I want to look like a butterfly, Ethan said excitedly. A butterfly? How lovely. I'll make you look like a colorful butterfly. Samantha grabbed her makeup kit and right there in the ice cream shop transformed Ethan's face into a blue and gold butterfly. Other kids gathered to watch, and soon she was doing makeup for several of them under the delighted gaze of their parents. Richard watched the scene and felt something he hadn't in a long time: wholeness. His family was there, together, happy. It wasn't the traditional family he'd imagined having, but it was a family full of love, art, and acceptance. Daddy, look how pretty I turned out. Ethan came to show his butterfly makeup. You look beautiful, son. Richard picked him up. A very special butterfly. And me too. Jack showed off his lion makeup. I'm the king of the jungle. You're both the kings of my jungle, Richard said, hugging both boys. Samantha finished doing the other kids' makeup and walked over to them. I think we can head home now, she said softly. To our home? Ethan asked hopefully. Samantha glanced at Richard, who nodded with a smile. To our home, she confirmed. The drive back to the apartment was full of lively chatter, car music, and laughter. The boys told Samantha all about what had happened at school during the week she'd been away, and she listened to every detail attentively. When they got home, Mrs. Jenkins greeted them with a huge smile. So glad you're back, sweetheart. She hugged Samantha tightly. The house wasn't the same without you. It's good to be back, Mrs. Jenkins. And what about these two? The nanny looked at the kids' makeup. So handsome. You've become little artists. Aunt Samantha did it, Jack explained proudly. At school, in front of everyone. And no one thought it was weird? No one. Everyone loved it, Ethan added. Mrs. Jenkins gave Richard an approving look. Now you're speaking a language I understand, she murmured. That night, after the boys went to bed, without protests or nightmares, Richard and Samantha were alone in the living room. So, she said, sitting beside him on the couch, how are we going to do this? Do what? Us. This family. How do we make it work? Richard took her hand, intertwining their fingers. Slowly, with patience, with lots of talking. He met her gaze. And with lots of love. Are you sure you want this? A family where your kids can wear makeup, play with dolls, pick colorful clothes? I'm sure I want a family where my kids can be who they are without fear or judgment. Richard kissed her hand. And I'm sure I want you in that family. What if someone criticizes us? If other parents comment, if your family doesn't approve, then they'll have to deal with us. Because we'll stand together, protecting our kids and our love. Samantha smiled, leaning closer to him. Our kids. I like the sound of that. They're ours, Samantha. You've won their hearts in a way I've never seen before. And mine too. Richard. I love you, he said, realizing it was the first time he'd spoken those words to her. I love you. I love how you care for the boys. I love your art. I love your patience with me. I love you too, she replied, tears in her eyes. I love you. I love Jack and Ethan. I love this strange and beautiful family we've made. They kissed, and it felt like all the puzzle pieces had finally fallen into place. Promise me something? Samantha said when they pulled apart. Anything. Promise that if you ever have doubts or fears, you'll talk to me before exploding? That we'll solve problems together? I promise. And you promise you'll be patient with me when I stumble along the way? I promise. As long as you keep trying. I'll always try. 6 months later, the Thompson-Miller family, Samantha had kept her last name, but the boys insisted on adding Miller to theirs too, had become an example of diversity and acceptance in their Upper East Side building. Jack had become a little artist, creating elaborate makeup looks, not just for himself, but for classmates and neighbors. His designs were true works of art, and he already talked about studying visual arts when he grew up. Ethan had discovered his passion for cooking and gardening, spending hours in the kitchen with Samantha and tending to the balcony plants. Her dream was to have a restaurant with its own garden when she grew up. Richard continued therapy, but now by choice, not obligation. He had discovered that talking about his feelings and fears helped him become a better father and a better partner. Samantha had expanded her business, offering artistic makeup workshops for children. Her specialty was therapeutic sessions in hospitals, where she helped sick children feel more beautiful and confident. Their home had become a gathering place for other progressive families in the neighborhood. It was common to find kids playing in the apartment, painting faces, inventing characters, and exploring their creativity without limits. Mrs. Jenkins had become like a grandmother to Jack and Ethan, and a great ally to Samantha. She often said she had never seen a family so close and happy. "You know what I've learned these past few months?" Richard said to Samantha one evening as they watched the boys play in the living room. "What?" "That being a father isn't about shaping your kids into what we want them to be. It's about giving them the tools to be who they truly are. And being a stepmother isn't about replacing their mom," Samantha added. "It's about honoring her memory and continuing to plant love in their lives." "Do they talk about Jennifer with you?" "They do. And it's beautiful how they hold on to their memories of her. Jack told me she used to make up stories about magical colors. Ethan remembers her perfume and how she sang them to sleep." "And how do you handle that?" "With gratitude. Gratitude that she loved these boys so much, they still carry that love inside them. And that she loved you so much she taught you to be the amazing father you are today." Richard kissed her, feeling once again that sense of wholeness only she could bring. "Daddy, Aunt Samantha," Jack came running. "Ethan made up a new dance. Come see." They went to the living room to watch Ethan perform an elaborate routine full of spins and dramatic gestures. The boy had tied one of Samantha's colorful scarves around his waist like a skirt and danced with complete freedom. "That's beautiful, Ethan," Samantha clapped. "Did you make that up yourself?" "I did. It's the dance of the colorful butterfly who dreams of flying up to Mommy in the sky." Richard felt a tightness in his chest, but this time it was from joy. Seeing his son express his feelings through art, without fear of judgment, was one of life's greatest gifts. "Can I dance with you?" Richard asked, surprising everyone. Ethan beamed and taught his father the steps. Soon, the whole family was dancing in the living room, laughing and having more fun than ever. Mrs. Jenkins appeared in the kitchen doorway, drying her hands on her apron and smiling. "Now this," she murmured to herself. "Now this house has real life in it." The end. This story teaches us that true love accepts and celebrates differences, that being a parent means creating a space where children can flourish exactly as they are, and that it's never too late to change, grow, and become a better version of ourselves. Richard learned that masculinity isn't defined by limitations, but by courage, compassion, and the ability to love unconditionally. Samantha discovered that families aren't just made by blood, but by love, dedication, and the daily choice to show up. Jack and Ethan grew up knowing they could dream of any career, play with anything, and express their feelings in any way, because they have a family that loves and supports them unconditionally, and all of them honored Jennifer's memory by building a new family that celebrates diversity, creativity, and love in all its colorful forms. Now tell us, what did you think of this story of resilience and love? Do you believe Richard made the right decision by opening his mind and his heart? Share your honest thoughts in the comments below. If you have a similar story to tell, we'd love to hear it. Thank you so much for being here with us. Don't forget to like this video, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel, so you won't miss other heartfelt stories like this one.